Hey, welcome to our Thursday Q&A. My name is Michael Bird. I've been a personal trainer for about 8 years, and I'm the owner of ARC Training Gym. And this is Joseph Hwang, and I will let him introduce himself.
Hey everyone. Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Joseph Hwang. I'm the founder of Let's Get Coffee. It's a digital marketing agency focused primarily on the e-commerce side of things. I've been in the digital marketing world for about 10 years now, and I've seen quite a bit, and would love to share some tips that I've learned over the years.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about goals, goal setting, and some things that come with that. Michael, first question, what is an immovable or overarching goal, and why is setting an ambitious goal or overarching long-term goal important to moving the needle forward?
So, that's a good question. The way I look at an immovable goal or overarching goal is something that's never going to be changed. So, this is something that I struggled with or battled with for a little while, primarily because the goals that I was setting, I thought were pretty heavy hitters. Like, and I tell this to many people, me building a business for 3 generations, especially with my nieces, trying to do the best I can for them. I thought that was a pretty good goal until I started getting back into the faith and realizing that if my goal is something along the lines of continually searching for God and trying to live a more Christian life day by day, that's something that's never going to change, and I can always go towards that. And I think it's important to set those immovable goals so that way it doesn't feel like we pass by it or we don't realize we've even achieved it at some point, but it's something that stays there that we're going to continually be working towards to better ourselves, and everything's going to fall in line. You can think of it as like your North Star. But yeah, that's what I got
Hmm.
on that one. How about you, Joseph?
Yeah, this is actually a tough one for me because whenever I think of goals, I immediately think about all the different sub goals that follow any one particular goal. So like for me, I think an immovable or like an overarching goal would be like, um, really similar to what you had mentioned about having based on your core values to determine where you see yourself in X number of years. Like for example, in 5 years, you would like to be at X place. But then, with that being said, how does that relate to your core values? And your core values could be different from everyone else's. It could be family based, it could be professional based. And so uh, and when we talk about goals, it's for me, I think goals should also follow a certain kind of framework. Uh, and there is a type of framework that some of and it's called SMART goals. And SMART goals is just really a way to kind of help craft a particular goal that you can actually measure yourself against in a time-based manner that has to be relatable and actionable or achievable, I should say, within that particular time period. So long-winded answer there.
Oh no, I think that was great, and don't mean to put you on the spot, but do could you give the acronym breakdown for SMART goal? Because I think that is a good point, the measurable part especially.
Sure. Yeah. So SMART goals, SMART, S stands for it has to be specific. So you want to include details of what you want to accomplish. M stands for measurable, which is to be able to measure your progress and determine if you've achieved your goal. A is, if it's achievable. So, challenge yourself there. R is relevant, and T is time bound. So, ensuring that your objectives are attainable within a certain time frame.
Cool. Awesome. And I think what you said as far as thinking about all the like sub goals that go under your big goal is important as well. And this is why I like to try to word it as like the overarching one as an immovable goal, because it can get very confusing when we have this conversation without breaking that down. But I think that's very important as far as having the time frame to it if we're not talking about that immovable goal. Because that if you don't have the time frame, then are you really going to achieve it? But before I tangent on that for too long, we'll go on to the next question. Um, so, Joseph, I'll let you take this one first. How do you determine what your goal should be? And should you have different goals for personal, career, spiritual, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, I know, you're probably going to hate hearing this, but honestly, the answer just depends. Like, how do you determine what your goal should be? I believe that if you follow that SMART framework, then you should be able to say, hey, like these are, you can even come up with like 5 or 10 different SMART goals, right? But then like from there, you pick one that is maybe like the most similar or the best aligned to where you see yourself in, again, 5 years. Um, like whether or not you should have different goals for like personal, career, and what was the last one again?
Spiritual.
Spiritual. Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I think you absolutely can, right? Because those are different facets of your life. Uh, Personally, for me, I like to keep the personal side separate from my career side. Uh, from a spiritual standpoint, that is, I think, to me, maybe most similar to personal. So maybe those two overlap. So, um, yeah, I mean, I guess like to answer the question, you definitely can have different goals. But I think there also has to be some level of prioritization between those goals. What
Yeah.
about yourself?
I mean, I do agree. The it depends answer is always a tricky one, isn't it? But I'll piggyback off of what you said just now as far as the personal and spiritual can be sometimes similar. And I know for me what that means is because your relationship with God is supposed to be a personal one. So that's going to kind of bridge into both. But I do think it's good also. Well, actually, let me go to the determine what your goal should be. I think that immovable goal, that overarching, what are you going for in the end goal is going to help your North Star so you can pick those sub goals as Joseph was talking about earlier. And when we do that, it will help us be able to structure what that breakdown is. I'm sure you've heard of the term reverse engineering. So when we're reverse engineering, for me, getting closer to God every day and living a more Christian life, I had to figure out what does that mean with the skill sets that I have, with the things that I'm interested in, with how I feel the Holy Spirit is leading me, to be able to see what that breakdown is. And entrepreneurship seems to be the skill set that I was given. And now I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I don't think anyone's really perfect at it, but that helps me break down what are those underlying goals. So personal training, as far as the physical aspect, seems to be where my skills tend to point to. I've been in personal training for, like I said, about 8 years, whether it was personal training or coaching. And I was a gymnast for 14 years, competitively for 11. So the physical side of
Wow.
things is, yeah, it's like second nature to me sometimes. So I think with once I put those two together, I realized, okay, let me use my strengths and try to figure out how to be the best version of myself in that realm so I can serve the most people with my skill sets. And then, of
Mm,
course, under that, we start to break down. Actually, I don't want to rush into that. I think that's one of the next questions. But that does mean that my personal, spiritual, and career goals tend to be different, but they're going to be aligning me to the ultimate purpose. So, spiritual would be make sure I'm in ministry. I'm working on a mentorship program along with some of the deacons of my church and a couple of the pastors at my church, because, in a coach position, you tend to be a mentor. So, again, speaking to my skill sets when it comes to personal, I'm constantly trying to learn to be the best example for those who are around me or coming after me.
mm,
Again, just because as a coach, you don't want a coach who's going to be not taking his own advice. Um, so this is why I really work towards that the best I can. And then when it comes to the career, again, entrepreneurship seems to be where the career side of things are. So I use what my strengths are and I try to focus that into the career and the determining what the goal is. It can be tricky. I think in the end, it's one of those like at some point you have to just start. So when I started realizing that the physical side of things was where my skill sets are, and the entrepreneurship seems to be where the career is. I just put those together, and I was like, well, let me see where this coaching thing takes me. And it's been a windy road, but seems to be taking me more and more towards being a trainer for the long term, of course. So
Well, okay.
yeah, was I concise enough with that? I feel like I kind of bounced around a little bit there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like it's I think it's really good. I think something that you mentioned earlier was just the whole idea of like the like reverse engineering part, right? Because I think, for me, even just like thinking about like the two questions that we've already kind of talked through, it's absolutely true, right? Because like I keep saying, hey, like where do I see myself in 5 years? And I feel like a lot of people have that particular question, like whether you go into like a job interview or whatnot, like people like your manager or like someone will always be asking like, hey, like where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I think, just kind of like th for me thinking about it again, identifying what that goal looks like, but then using that reverse engineering part to kind of determine, hey, like how do I work back from there? So, in 5 years, say like I want to be able to achieve X, but then what are like all the different sub steps or like sub goals under that I would have to achieve? And then use that to sort of, guide my progress or guide my path towards that particular goal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That was a game changing one when I learned that one for sure.
Yeah.
All right, your turn.
Yeah. Um, how do you track progress towards a goal through prioritization? And what is the difference, if any, between a goal and a priority?
So I think this is tricky. Kind of to your point about the first question with the overarching goal versus sub goals. And, when we think about goals, we tend to think a little bit more immediate than like when I'm on my deathbed, what do I look back and see? So, someone at a meeting today mentioned the book, The One Thing. And in that book, it's talking about how you have a priority, there aren't priorities. And so I think when it comes to prioritizing what I do for my goal, I try my best to think what is the moving needle move that I could do right now to really move things forward. And when it comes to, and I'll use the sub goal. I'm trying to change my wording a little bit, so I'll do my best to start that now. I like to call the sub goals targets or milestones. But I'll go with the word targets because that's one I've been using more frequently, so I just remember it better. But when I'm going towards my targets, the way I prioritize what I'm going to do is, like I said, trying to figure out what is going to be the needle moving move. And this almost sounds backwards, but I'm not the most organized person. But what I realize is if I start going back to what makes me or what I'm comfortable doing, I usually stop, take a quick look, and see if there's something else I need to be doing. Because if I'm doing what I'm comfortable with, usually it's because I'm avoiding the thing that I need to be doing. So
Hmm.
I use Google Drive as a lot of people do. So I'll always write down my to-do list. And if it's going to be one-off type things, then I'll, prioritize those or put those at the top of the list. And if I realize I'm moving things to the top of the list again that I'm comfortable with, I'll just sit back and see if I need to change those things up. And also, since I'm now starting a new personal training business, the one of the other frameworks I'm using is if it's broken or if I notice it's breaking, address that immediately. So I had one person on board and it was just super clunky. And I wrote a process down on how everything was supposed to be because I've done it plenty of times.
Hmm.
But since it's a new structure that I'm using, it was a little bit clunky. And I realized that there was like some paperwork I needed to send to them. There was some habits I needed to put on. So what I did was I put in all of the things that broke or all of the things I had to go back and do into the process. So that when the second person came in, there was only like a couple of things that I had to kind of like go, oh crap, I have to go and address that real quick. And
Mm,
so if I notice that something is broken, then I go and I address those things first. So initially, hopefully there's at least like a few non-negotiables that you already know, that are like step one, step two, step three. Just like, when you go to learn a new topic, look up the books that are on that topic, see if someone has already done it, study their process, model their process, don't copy it. I think those things are kind of mostly known to a lot of people who are probably in your position. But when I'm going back to readjust that, it's usually if I'm getting comfortable, probably I'm supposed to be doing something else. And if I see that it's broken, that's top of the list immediately. And then I'll be
mm,
real quick on this part of the answer. What's the difference between a goal and a priority? A goal to me is something that you're striving towards, that is going to be like a milestone or a landmark that you're really trying to hit. The priority is the step that you put in place in order to move to that goal or to that target that you're going for.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense.
How about you,
Yeah.
Justin?
Yeah, so when we talked about progressing towards a goal, the way that I like to look at it is um, like what is that KPI that
Mm.
I should be measuring myself against, right? So KPI stands for key performance indicator. And in my line of work, I'm a marketer, and so I work with a lot of business owners. And usually they have like a general idea of like where they want to be. But then there's always that question of like, okay, so then what is that? What is that KPI? Like, what are you really trying to increase? And I think in most cases it is just revenue, right? So revenue runs a business, and if you're able to increase revenue, then usually everything is, that's good, right? So, that being said, if say, using this example, if say the goal is to, um, let's say the as an example, let's say a business wants to increase their revenue by, let's just say like 50,000 or 100,000. Keep the number simple. Uh, and so the question is like, how do we increase revenue by 100,000? So you start thinking about different ways of like, well, here are like 10 or 20 different ways that you can actually increase revenue. But then like which one of those, and this is moving towards like the priority side of things, like which one of those will help you achieve 100,000 the soonest or the fastest, right? It could be one thing, it could be like a combination of things. But the idea here is like, what are there any low-hanging fruits that you're able to kind of get out of the way to help you hit the 100K? And then, from there, if you want to set your next goal, let's say you want to increase it by another 100,000, so the 200,000 total, net total, then like what's like steps 2 and 3 and 4 beyond that? Um, one thing that I also like to use, and would also, advise anyone who isn't doing this is to come up with a good task management like system, if you will, to help keep track of your goals or like your priorities. Like as an example, for me, I use Trello, which is like this online project management tool. You can, get yourself a free version. It doesn't cost anything. And what's great about that is that you can list down all your different goals, and then add in all these details about it. You can add in checklists to say, hey, like I need to accomplish 1 through 10. And from like a bird's eye view, you can see how well you're progressing against that particular goal. So, yeah, just wanted to throw that out there.
Cool. Not paid
Yeah.
advertising for Trello though, but
Yeah, yeah, it's
it is a good
we're
program.
not getting like sponsored by Trello
Yeah.
or anything like that. That's just me, like what I use, and
Yeah.
it's been helpful.
That's a good one though. I haven't used Trello in quite a bit, but definitely helped me when I was using it for sure. And just on that, oh, the guy's name is leaving me, but I think it's John Doerr or Joe Doerr, something along those lines. But the book that he wrote was Measure What Matters, and it goes over OKRs. And that just
Oh
came to
yeah.
mind as you were talking about that. So yeah, I think what you described, like if someone's looking for a book to read, that's probably a good one. And I really do like. I'm so glad that we're doing this because like our perspectives are very different, and um, just you went pretty technical there, and I like that a lot. It's good. That's not a bad thing at all. That's really good. I'm sure you watching are finding that helpful too. Um, so the next question is how can you stay accountable to your goal? I think that's a really good one because accountability, I mean, in my line of work is like one of the biggest things that people are looking for.
Yeah, yeah. Man, that's a really great question. I think at least in my line of work, again, from a like a marketing perspective, the best way to stay accountable to your goal is to just be genuine like for myself, I'll be working with clients, so being genuine with the clients. And whether that is um, it could come in the form of communication of saying, hey, like we're doing this is like where we are, halfway through the month, we are doing better than expected, or sometimes we're doing not as good as we expected, right? But like it's still having that transparency and that accountability to say, hey, like this is where we are. Um, I know that I have heard of, different businesses getting burned by other marketers, and I'm sorry if you are one of those who have been burned in the past. But I have heard these stories of how a client would get signed on with a marketing agency, and the marketing agency is really just focused mostly about the revenue, and that's all they really care about because that's their goal, right? But then at the same time, they don't necessarily follow through with what's being promised, and that to me is just, I mean, this is sort of going off on a tangent. It's not so much about setting goals, but that's just a bad business practice. However, I think long term, it does affect your goal. As an agency, if you keep promising things, but then you don't deliver, or at least you don't communicate like what's going on, then people are going to lose trust in you, and that's not good for you, and that's definitely not good for them. So, yeah, definitely just communication. But outside of like the business perspective, if say we're talking about personal goals, for me, I really like just telling more people about what my goal is, right? And just whether it's finding that accountability partner or just, telling a friend or like a neighbor, hey, like I'm starting to do this, right? And then so maybe later on, they might ask you, hey, like how are you doing against, this particular goal? So that's a motivating factor for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of had a feeling that you and I would have a similar answer on this because anyone who in the entrepreneurship field, it's like accountability partner in some way, shape, or form is huge. So yeah, that's kind of where I was going to is having an accountability partner is going to be a big thing, and it doesn't always have to be one person. Sometimes it can be, as Joseph just said, like telling a neighbor. Because once you tell somebody that, it does put a little pressure on you. Like you might get asked like, hey, how's so and so, or how's what's it what doing, and if you're like haven't really addressed it feels weird, and you don't it's one of those, a lot of people bring it up. Reputation is hard to build, and once you lose it, it's very hard to get back if you ever do. So if you're the guy, and I've been here before where with certain things, just because the stuff that I was going through personally, where if you're the guy who just keeps dropping the ball, like you're known as the guy who keeps dropping the ball. And thankfully, I have more distance in my life from that happening. But yeah, accountability partner is huge. Shout out to Abraham in Cote d'Ivoire, who has been accountability partner for me for 2 years now, pretty
Wow.
consistently. Joseph and I just met recently, and just so blessed that we're in the same area as far as live close enough to each other and see each other pretty frequently. So now I have someone who's an in-person accountability partner. And I think this also goes back to what you were saying before as far as KPIs. Because if you set KPIs, it's easier to keep yourself accountable to things that you can put a number to, or
Right.
like
Yeah.
it's a task. You're like you either did that or you didn't do that. Um, and so making it very simple, I have a document where I like will write down my typical to-dos like daily, weekly, monthly, and I just check them off in a checkbox. And that way, if I look back at it and I haven't done it, I have that little conversation with myself. Is it because it wasn't a need today? So like one of the things is reach out to people on odd number days. If it's an even number day, then that makes sense why I didn't check that off. But if it's an odd
Mm,
number day, then it's like I need to go do that. And if I
mhm,
don't go do that, there are many tactics that you have. Some people will treat themselves with something. Sometimes I'll be like, I'm not going to watch a YouTube video, or I'm not going to, go do whatever until I get it done. Some people do the rubber band trick, snap themselves on the wrist. Not saying any of those are good or bad. Just, there are some other strategies out there. But I think just to your point, my biggest one, or I should say to one of your points, my biggest one is probably the accountability partner thing, and then probably actually I'd say it's a close tie, is having those steps that I have to do regularly and checking those off. So the KPIs, if I don't do my KPI for that day, then I need to go get it done. And part of this is just experience of having started multiple businesses, and now having been in the training business for a while, you kind of notice if you don't get certain things done, it ends up being detrimental. Like you realize, like everything starts to go downhill. To your point about the marketing company who's just caring about revenue, if you're not doing the thing, whoever your client is gets very upset, and you don't want to end up doing that because now you're out of a business. And then just if I were to bring it down to like very basic moves when it comes to, or tactics, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to personal training, or working out, it's as simple as writing down the weights you did, writing down the reps you did. If you're doing that, then you can stay accountable to your progressive overload, which basically means
mhm.
over time you're overloading your stresses, you're challenging yourself more and more. And if you don't know what you lifted last time, how are you going to know what you're lifting next? I think I did that wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, last time, next. um, so I think it's very important to kind of have those measurables, as you were saying, with the KPIs. If you're keeping it very practical, then measure your weights, measure how many reps you did, and then the accountability partner. I think accountability partner is probably going to be, for me, one of the biggest ones. It's just my personality. Some people are more analytical, and just the straight up numbers will help them. But for me, I like talking things out. I like brainstorming. Probably tell because I talk forever, but that's probably what's big for me. Um,
Gotcha. Yeah, and just to kind of like follow up on that a little bit more, like as you were like kind of like talking through like what like from your perspective what that is, right? It's a particular verse from the Bible actually came up, and it was Proverbs 14:23. It says, "In all toil there's a profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty." So what that basically means is that it can be interpreted to mean that hard work does pay off, but words are easy to they're easy, and they can rarely lead to anything unless you actually act upon them, right? So like for example, making a plan about like what you're going to do is not as effective, or like it's not really going to do anything unless you actually go and do that.
oh yeah,
So
100%. And that,
yeah.
and just bringing up a Bible verse, that's like repeated multiple times in the Bible. So, and I think there's a point to that. Like action is huge.
hmm Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, so I guess, leading into our last question here, when is a goal no longer a goal, or when does a goal need to be adjusted?
So, I think a goal, this is one that's really hard to decipher. And I think this is why a lot of people feel like they're on a hamster wheel and not moving forward, or sometimes actually going backwards. But from my experience, it goes to what I was mentioning earlier, that when I feel almost too comfortable doing something, I probably need to change things up. And
Hmm.
this is different for everybody, because sometimes people end up being comfortable in what they're doing and it is productive. So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about if you're somebody who typically goes on the treadmill at the gym, but you don't necessarily go to weights, If you're finding that your goal is to build muscle, but you're still going to the treadmill more than anything else, that's when we need to adjust that goal. And then I think a goal, and I'm kind of answering this backwards, but I think a goal is no longer a goal when trying to think if I have an exact example myself. Um, I'm not going to try to wait too long to think of one, but basically, I've noticed that if I have a goal set for myself and I'm continually pushing it back or not getting it done, or I'm like half doing it, it's usually because it's not really aligning with what my core values are. So this is something that I had a tab pulled up. I had a couple of tabs pulled up, but I don't think I really need to go to those. But I think it's very important to uh, figure out what your core values are. And once you do that, if you find that you feel stuck going towards a goal or um, unencouraged, I don't want to say bored because I feel like boredom can be interpreted very wrong in this situation. Boredom should not be an
Mm.
indicator. You should honestly not even know how to be bored if you're going towards a goal. But if you're feeling almost almost like you're just not able to get out of bed to go towards your goal, it's in my experience has something to do with your core values or your mission to what you're doing. And I would just reevaluate your core values. And I'm going to pull up one of the tabs just to mention a couple of the values that popped up. Integrity, honesty, fidelity, charity, responsibility, self-discipline. Those are some core values that are ethical as well. And there are many, many others as far as core values are concerned. Like that list is pretty much endless. But if you find out what your core values are, which I made a few a while ago, clear communication, honesty, and perseverance were the ones that I had. And I went through many iterations of trying to figure out what those are. And those are the ones that I kind of ended up with. Now, I don't rely on those as much as I used to because now that's just one of those that I realized they were coming from biblical values. So my
Mhm.
values now are biblical. And if I start getting away from that, that's what kind of helps me adjust. But yeah, I think a goal is no longer a goal when it's not aligning with your values, or if you have that immovable goal, whatever your midterm or your target is taking you away from that, or even like backwards. That's when you just like, hey, this isn't a goal anymore. This is actually detrimental. And then adjusting that, I think you need to adjust that pretty much as soon as you notice it. Um, one of the things that I tell my clients is if you find yourself saying, I should go do this, and just the example that usually came up was you're sitting down at the end of the day watching TV and you're just watching a TV show, but you should be going out and walking, or you should be, doing your stretches for the day. If your head is like, oh, I should go do that, go do it. Because if you're not getting those things done and it actually is going to take you towards your goal, then you got to address that as soon as possible. But those are kind of like real in the moment steps. But overarching, I think a goal needs to be adjusted if you realize that whatever your actionables are taking you away from them, or if you just find that they're not aligning with your values. I'm
Mhm.
sure if I uh,
Mhm.
rapped on this for a while, I probably have more to say about it, but I don't want to be talking forever because I can be long winded. So, how about you, Joseph?
Yeah, yeah. Man, this is also like a tough question for me to answer because, if I can just share an example of something that I'm going through right now is, um, I'm actually in the process of going through a rebrand. So the name of my company is called Let's Grab Coffee. And it sounds like it's a cafe, but it's not. I do digital marketing, I specialize in commerce. And so, while speaking with, different individuals in the past, recently, I've come to understand that the name of my company doesn't necessarily convey it doesn't communicate the same thing as what I actually specialize in. And so um, I would say that, at the start of this year, the goal for me was to uh, sign on two additional clients, for the year 2024. However, before that actually happens, it's been brought to my attention that I may need to actually adjust the goal so that I focus more on this rebranding portion before maybe switching back to signing on these two additional clients. So, I guess that to say, your goals may change from time to time. However, um, if say they are still important, they are still considered immovable in your opinion to help you achieve or help you accomplish what you want to accomplish in that particular year, I think they can still be held on to. Um, yeah, I don't, does that make sense, Michael? What I just said?
Yeah, yeah, it does make sense. I mean, this is just a hard question, but it yeah, your example of the rebrand, I think, kind of paints the picture pretty well because it's real, it's relatable. And I'm sure you who are watching this can think of moments when you had a goal for yourself, like getting 4 clients or maybe making X amount of dollars, and you're like, oh, there's this other thing I have to address before I even get to that. Because I mean, when we first met, that was what I said to you was I thought you were a coffee shop, but then you said something about Google ads, and I was like, well, I want to learn about that too, but my ears perked up because of coffee, and I used to be a barista. So anytime someone brings up something about coffee, I'm listening. But yeah, so I think that it does make sense, and I think it's just one of those things. Like if we sat here and talked for a while longer, we adjust our answers and make them more like particular everything. But yeah, it is a hard question, especially I think to our point of why we're doing this is to show you, the viewer, how we're going through this as we're navigating things as well. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, we've both been in our respective fields for quite a while. Getting the chills just thinking about it. You might not be able to see it, but it's pretty mind blowing sometimes how even when you feel like you have to start over, we're starting over with about a decade each of experience. So you'll be able to see the transformations of how our answers are going to change going through this too. So yeah, just from where we are right now, and given that we're trying to provide value that is realistic, I think that yeah, that makes total sense for my rambling on to your answer. Yeah. Um, I guess before we wrap up, is there anything else that you might want to add or anything you want to shout out revolving around goals before we close out?
Uh, Yeah, I mean, I think maybe just to to kind of like add on a little bit to my answer on the last question there, right? It's just and this is also something that you mentioned just now, which is there is the possibility that as you are acting towards a particular goal, that you might discover other areas that you also need to work on. And then from there, you might have to you create smart goals for yourself, right? Because I think sometimes if you're trying to move the needle towards a particular goal, but you feel like you're not making any progress, it's very possible that the goal itself is just too broad. And you actually need to get a little bit more specific with that goal, and break it down into even smaller bite-sized pieces so that you know you can actually see movement towards that goal. So yeah, I just wanted to add that a little bit in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's huge. I think the specific part of smart is like that's missed a lot because if you're not specific, it is very ambiguous of what you're even going towards. I think my last 2 cents is no matter what you're going for, believe in yourself. Even if the goal changes, even if it feels like you're going off course, just don't give up. It's one of those situations. Sometimes, yes, you need to take a minute for yourself. Sometimes you needed to take a break. You need to go find a shoulder to cry on. But at the end of the day, just do your best. As my aunt would say, keep moving forward. And that would be my last 2 cents. Man, I really enjoyed that conversation. I look forward to doing more of these. I hope that you got some value out of watching this video. And Joseph and I are going to be doing more of these going forward. So Thursday at 7 p.m. is the scheduled time when they're going to be released. Hopefully these will turn into live soon as we learn our technology better. And yeah, thanks for joining, Joseph. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, absolutely.